The Rolex Submariner No-Date just crossed $10,000 retail in the US. That's the official price, before gray market premiums push it toward $15,000. 5-year waitlists on the GMT-Master II. The Pepsi, discontinued forever at Watches and Wonders, 2026. And somewhere in a workshop in Dongguan, China, a team of people is building a mechanical watch for $150. That's making a lot of Swiss executives quietly nervous. These are the 5 Chinese mechanical watches worth knowing about. We're starting at the bottom of the list. By the time we get to number 1, everything you think you know about what a tourbillon costs is going to change. 5 Baltani D12S, 2025. The British Ministry of Defense commissioned 12 watchmakers in 1944. Wartime. Accuracy was life or death, not a marketing slogan. The specification was brutal in its simplicity. Black dial, Arabic numerals on a railroad chapter ring, luminous hands, sub-seconds at 6 o'clock, steel case, between 36 and 38 millimeters. No logos, no decorations, nothing that wasn't load-bearing. Every unnecessary gram of material, every decorative touch, every flourish that didn't contribute to legibility in the dark or durability under field conditions was stripped out. The watches that survived that spec became legend among collectors. Collectors call them the Dirty Dozen, and the originals have sold for over $30,000 at auction. If you want a genuine Jaeger-LeCoultre Calibra 479 from that 1944 production run, you are looking at years of searching and a price that'll remind you what the phrase military provenance does to a watch market. The Baltani D12S 2025 is $149. That's not a typo. But here's what most people miss when they first encounter it. The S 2025 is not a Rolex alternative. It doesn't try to look like anything from Geneva. It references a 70-year-old British military specification, and that specificity is exactly what saves it from the category of cheap watch, trying to be something it isn't. Baltani launched around 2019 out of Guangdong province, built its reputation specifically in the vintage military category, and has been consistently described on Watch You Seek as delivering case finishing that competes with watches costing 2 to 3 times the price. The S 2025 runs on a Miyota 9015. 24 joules, beating at 28,800 vibrations per hour, 42-hour power reserve, double dome sapphire crystal on top, and Swiss superluminova rather than the generic phosphorescent paint most brands use at this price point. The forum member who flagged this detail on WatchCrunch specifically mentioned the anti-reflective coating on the sapphire as competing with Hamilton's field watch offerings, which retail at 5 to 6 times the price for a comparable case and movement tier, and the size. Every Baltani is 36 millimeters, period correct for mid-century military design. Buyers who've spent years on 42mm sport watches sometimes balk. The lug-to-lug sits at 43 millimeters. On a standard 7-inch wrist, it fits proportionally, correctly, the way a field watch is supposed to sit. On a bigger wrist, it looks like an heirloom. That's either a problem or a feature depending on who you are. Picture the buyer who spent 2 years researching vintage military watches and decided the prices were absurd. Not the person who couldn't afford a Rolex, but the person who has the money and keeps asking why. Why does the name cost that much? Why does the case cost that much? Why is this finishing only available at this price? The Baltani D12 answers that question in a specific, limited way. It answers it doesn't have to. The finish on the applied Arabic numerals. The no-nonsense railroad chapter ring with its own kind of precision. The complete absence of branding that requires an explanation. There's a particular honesty in a watch that doesn't ask to be anything other than what it is. The Swiss figured this out in 1944 on behalf of the British Army. Guangdong figured it out in 2019 on behalf of anyone who doesn't want to pay $400 for it. The Jewelry Addict's Buying Guide, published in May 2026, noted something about buyers who return to buy a second Baltani after their first. They almost always buy a different category, not another military field watch, a regulator or a dress piece. The first purchase teaches them something about finishing quality at this price tier, and the second purchase tests whether that quality extends across the catalog. The answer, consistently, has been yes. There's a collector pattern I keep seeing. Someone spends years chasing brand names, buys a watch they don't love, sells it, buys another one, sells it. Then they stumble onto a forum thread about a $150 Chinese field watch and, almost as a joke, order one. It arrives in 10 days. They wear it for a week. At the end of the week, they still reach for it in the morning. Not because they've given up on something better, because it's the first watch they've owned where the watch and what they paid for it were in the same conversation. No guilt about wearing it in the rain. No anxiety about the scratch on the bezel from last Tuesday. Just a mechanical watch on a wrist, doing the one thing a watch is supposed to do. It's not the most exciting watch on this list. It's the most honest one. Which of these 5 would you actually wear daily? The Baltony is a soldier's watch. This next one is for the pilot who can't afford the IWC but refuses to settle. Before we move on to the next part, let me tell you this. Most people don't realize this, but buying a watch the wrong way can cost you thousands, and you won't even notice it until it's too late. That's why I created a complete insider guide to buying watches. The goal is simple. I'll help you stop guessing and start buying smart. You'll find the guide in the pinned comment and description. Now, let's move on to the next part. For Chronos Pilot, Explorer Homage with PT5000. In November 2024, a Watch You Seek forum member posted a full review of the Chronos Pilot, 39mm wide, 49mm lug-to-lug, 12.5mm tall, 100-meter water resistance, sapphire crystal, PT5000 movement inside. He bought it for approximately $150 direct from Chronos, not through a gray market AliExpress intermediary. His comparison point in the review was the IWC Mark XX, $5,800 at retail. He wrote the review sitting next to a certificate of deposit drawing 4.75%. The watch, he concluded, was a win. The CD would keep compounding. The Chronos would keep ticking. Both were sound investments, by different metrics. The forum backed him up. San Martin and Chronos share manufacturing roots in the Guangdong factory ecosystem, and the community consensus on Watch You Seek over several years of threads is specific. A $200 Chronos performs on par with a $400 Western micro brand in build quality and finishing. Case transitions between brushed and polished surfaces are clean at the edges. The bezel clicks are precise. The crown action is smooth and sealed correctly. But let's talk about the movement, because the PT5000 is the one actually complicated thing about this watch. The PT5000 is a Chinese-made caliber from the Dandong factory. It beats at 28,800 vibrations per hour, offers a 42-hour power reserve, and hacks. What it doesn't offer is the deep service infrastructure of a Seiko NH35, which has been in global production for decades and can be worked on by any watchmaker with a basic toolkit. The PT5000 is newer, less documented. One Watch You Seek buyer reported his rotor detached within a week. Others have run the same movement for years without incident. The forum consensus has drifted toward recommending a Miyota 9 series as the more reliable upgrade option if Chronos were to offer it. Let me be direct about this. The Chronos Pilot is a watch for someone who knows the movement situation and buys it anyway, because the case quality and the fit for the price has no equivalent. The IWC Mark XX exists in a different universe, not just a different price bracket. But the question the Chronos raises is this: how much of what you're paying for at $5,800 is the IWC name, and how much of it is the thing on your wrist? Pull them side by side on the internet. The Chronos doesn't have the finishing depth of the IWC. The movement is not in the same conversation. The sapphire, the overall dimensions, the lug-to-lug feel, the clean dial layout with its readable numerals and central seconds arrangement. These things get close enough that someone at a distance cannot tell what they're looking at. Someone close enough to read the dial can tell immediately. So the question becomes, who are you wearing the watch for? This is the question the Chinese watch market forces into the open, because the answer used to be obvious. Swiss meant quality in a way that nothing else could claim. That's less true now than it was in 2005. The gap hasn't closed all the way, but it's moved. And the Chronos is useful precisely because it sits in an uncomfortable middle. It's not the cheapest watch on this list. It's not the most impressive. It occupies the position where the value argument is most legible without being most dramatic. The IWC Mark XX case is hand-finished to a standard the Chronos can't reach. The NH35, equipped alternatives in the $200 range, offer more predictable, long-term service. The Chronos itself occupies the specific, narrow territory of what you get at this price when you optimize for case finishing over movement safety. And for a certain buyer, that's exactly the right trade. The Chronos buyer knows what they're doing. They've researched the PT5000. They've read the Watch You Seek thread, where the rotor detached. They bought it anyway because they wanted that case, that dial, that finishing, at that price. And they understood what they were accepting as a trade-off. That's not ignorance. That's considered consumer choice. And that kind of considered consumer choice, the willingness to look at a spec list honestly and decide what matters to you, is what this market now makes possible in a way that it couldn't 10 years ago. That pilot's watch costs 40 times less than its inspiration. The next one is about a GMT-Master waitlist that most people will never survive. 3. San Martin SN0116 GGMT. The Rolex GMT-Master II, Pepsi, reference 126710BLRO, was discontinued at Watches & Wonders 2026. The last retail price was $11,800. Within days of the announcement, Chrono 24 reported a 500% surge in purchase requests. By April, the secondary market price had climbed toward $22,500. The watch that was theoretically available at $11,800 was trading at nearly double that, because it simply wasn't available at $11,800. It never really was. The Batman GMT, the Batgirl, the Bruce Wayne, all still in production as of mid-2026. Every one of them, 5-year wait lists at authorized dealers. You get on the list, you buy what the dealer offers you, you wait, and somewhere in year 3 you wonder if there's a different way to do this. The San Martin SN0116G is $275 to $320. Depending on configuration. Ben's Watch Club reviewed both versions of the SN0116 in April 2025 and described searching for alternative GMTs for less than $450 as quite a challenge at the time of writing. The San Martin beat a Seiko SSK005K1, which is Seiko's budget, GMT, in build quality and bracelet execution. It compared favorably to Spinnaker's Croft model, which uses the same Seiko NH34A movement and sells for considerably more. The bracelet particularly came in for praise across multiple reviews, each link a separate machined piece, the clasp with micro adjustment, the ends mating to the case with no gap or play. What's inside is the Seiko NH34A. This is important. The NH34A is a genuine Japanese GMT movement with an independently adjustable fourth hand, not a complication module added onto a regular three-handed movement. An actual GMT caliber, which means the GMT hand can be set to track a second time zone without moving the hour and minute hands. It's the same category of functionality as the Rolex 3000 285 movement that runs the GMT-Master II. Priced at 63 times the cost of the entire San Martin watch. A Watch You Seek member put a SN0116 under a microscope in May 2024 and published images of the case edges, bracelet links, dial printing, and crown. His verdict: the case finishing was above the price point, and the bracelet quality competitive with pieces costing 2 to 3 times more. He specifically noted the 24-hour bidirectional ceramic bezel with 24 clicks operated with consistent resistance. On watches twice this price, bezel tension issues are a common complaint. On the SN0116, in his testing, it wasn't. Picture the collector who saved for 2 years for a Rolex GMT, got on the wait list, bought a date just first as a relationship-building purchase with their AD, waited 3 more years, got offered a ladies' piece instead of what they wanted, walked out. They exist in numbers, and they post about it regularly on Watch You Seek. Some of them are now wearing a San Martin SN0116G. Some of them feel fine about it. Some of them feel like they got away with something. That last feeling is worth paying attention to, because it might be the most honest reaction to what's happening in the watch market right now. One thing the GMT Master conversation almost never addresses directly: The person buying a Rolex GMT-Master II in 2026 is not primarily buying a watch. They're buying access to a system, the authorized dealer relationship, the service history, the gray market liquidity, the resale value floor. The watch is almost secondary. Buy a Batman GMT at $11,800 retail today, and you can sell it tomorrow for approximately the same amount. That liquidity is a real thing the San Martin cannot offer. But if you don't want the system, if you want to actually wear a watch that tracks 2 time zones, that has a ceramic bezel and an automatic movement, and looks presentable at a work dinner, the question of whether the Rolex crown is part of your purchase becomes very concrete. Most people who've bought the SN0116G have stopped asking themselves that question after about 2 weeks. By then, the watch is just a watch, a good one, that you wear. Drop in the comments. Would you put a Chinese GMT on your wrist, or is the Rolex crown part of what you're buying? A GMT for $300. Everything so far has been rational. What comes next is where this gets harder to explain. 2 San Martin Sen 0111 diver. The Rolex Submariner No-Date, reference 124060, retailed at $9,500 in early 2025. By January 2026, after a 5.8% increase, it crossed $10,000 at US retail for the first time. The Submariner date, reference 126610LN, now carries an official retail of $11,350. On the gray market, unworn examples of the 126610LN are trading between $15,675 and $16,320, which is roughly 40% above the retail price that already requires an AD relationship to access. The San Martin SN0111 retails at approximately $165. Take the ratio seriously, because it's not just a marketing headline. The actual ratio between a gray market Submariner date and the SN0111, somewhere between 80 and 100 to 1. The headline turns out to be accurate. The SN0111 runs a Seiko NH35A, 24 joules, beating at 21,600 vibrations per hour, 41-hour power reserve, hacks, hand winds, 40mm stainless steel case, 200-meter water resistance, unidirectional ceramic bezel insert with 60-minute markings, BGW9 Super Luminova, which glows harder and longer than the generic phosphorescent paint on watches costing 5 times this price. Oyster-style solid link bracelet. The Seiko NH35A is not a disposable movement in a cheap housing. It's the same caliber family that Seiko puts inside pieces retailing in the $400 to $800 range under their own name. The architecture has been refined over decades of production. Watchmakers around the world can service it with basic tools, and a service in most cities runs between $40 and $80. This matters because a watch you can service is a watch you can wear indefinitely, and indefinitely is a long time. On Watch You Seek, the thread where someone compared a San Martin Substyle to a Steinhardt Ocean One runs to 40+ replies. The Steinhardt uses an ETA 2824-2, which is a Swiss movement, and retails around $550. Gary from I Like Watches, in his comparison review before his passing, concluded that despite the Steinhardt's ETA and its double price, the San Martin was a slightly better watch in case finishing terms. The ETA is the better movement. The case quality wasn't. That's a specific, verifiable verdict from someone who handled both. The lume is where the SN0111 repeatedly surprises people. BGW9 is the same luminous compound used in Panerai watches. The application on the SN0111, according to multiple Watch You Seek owners, charges quickly and holds long. One forum member wrote that his SN0111 lume was still readable at 5 a.m. after charging at 9 p.m. the previous evening. His SKX was not. They were side by side. Now, the SN0111 is a Submariner-inspired watch, in the same way that almost everything in this category is Submariner-inspired. It doesn't attempt to carry Rolex markings or reproduce the crown logo, but the design lineage is obvious, and San Martin doesn't pretend otherwise. For some buyers, that matters. For others, It doesn't. The case finishing, the movement quality, and the 200-meter water resistance make it a functional dive watch, regardless of what it looks like when seen from the other side of the room. What you're actually buying is a tool watch that works underwater, holds up to daily wear, and won't keep you up at night if it gets scratched. That's a different proposition than the Rolex, and it's an honest one. What the SN0111 actually represents, beyond the spec sheet, is worth saying directly. It represents the moment when affordable alternative stopped being a polite phrase for compromise. Because this isn't a compromise. This is a well-made diver's watch for $165. The compromise is that you can't tell people it's a Rolex. That's the entire sacrifice. And I keep wondering what that sacrifice is actually worth. There's a useful data point here. In a Watch You Seek thread from late 2024, someone listed their San Martin SN0111 for sale after 2 years of daily wear, with dive use in Thailand and regular swimming in a chlorinated pool. Their asking price was $110. They sold it in 36 hours. The buyer asked no questions about the movement condition. They asked about the loom performance. The loom, in a 2-year worn daily diver, still performed well enough that a stranger paid $110 for it without hesitation. That's not a compromise. That's a watch. A diver for $165. That's already hard to argue with. What comes next exists in a different category entirely. One suggests tourbillon master, Saint 8230. The tourbillon was patented by Abraham Louis Breguet in 1801. He designed it to solve a specific problem. In a pocket watch, the balance wheel spends most of its time in a vertical position, and gravity acts differently on the regulating mechanism, depending on orientation. The tourbillon solution was a continuously rotating cage, typically containing 70 to 90 individual components, assembled to micron-level tolerances, spinning once per minute, constantly repositioning the balance wheel relative to gravity's pull. Whether a tourbillon meaningfully improves timekeeping in a modern wristwatch is a legitimately contested question. A wristwatch moves constantly on the wrist, which arguably does what the tourbillon's rotation was meant to do. Many watchmakers will tell you, off the record, that a well-regulated three-hander without a tourbillon will outperform a poorly regulated one with one. The timekeeping argument for the tourbillon in a wristwatch is weak, but nobody buys a tourbillon because they want to know what time it is. They buy one to watch what happens when you look through the dial. The cage rotating every 60 seconds, the balance wheel oscillating inside it, the gears feeding it from behind. It's the most complicated and visually extraordinary thing a mechanical watchmaker can produce. And for over 200 years, the price of admission was set accordingly. The entry-level Swiss tourbillon has historically started around $10,000. Houses like Jaeger-LeCoultre, whose Reverso Girotourbillon models sit at the more accessible end of their haute horlogerie range, enter the conversation around $25,000. Greubel Forsey, who arguably makes the world's finest tourbillons, starts around $250,000. The complication's price was inseparable from its meaning. The Suggest Tourbillon Master SU 8230SW retails at approximately $700. On Watch Crunch, a collector who described owning both a Suggest tourbillon and a much more expensive tourbillon in their personal collection wrote this about the comparison. It is really hard to argue with this Suggest, given it is a tiny fraction of the price of my current piece. A Watch You Seek reviewer who bought the SU8230RSW enamel dial version for $700 from the Suggest website described the Seagull ST8230 Movement's flying tourbillon cage as extremely well finished, with nearly flawless polish on all flat sanded surfaces. Their time grapher result, +6 to +11 seconds per day. For context, a vintage Patek Philippe tourbillon from the 1990s running ±15 seconds per day is considered an acceptable performer for auction purposes. The Suggest, at $700, runs within that range. The comparison isn't fair in any other respect, but on this one narrow metric, it's honest. The Seagull ST8230 movement is manufactured by the Tianjin Seagull Watch Group, founded in January 1955 in Tianjin, currently producing approximately 1/4 of all mechanical watch movements manufactured globally. Seagull has sold tourbillon movements to Swiss and European brands for years, who then put their own names on the casebacks and charged accordingly. The era of a Chinese movement automatically being a mark against a watch is over. The factories that build movements for some European houses are the same factories building the ST8230. The SU8230 SW case is 41 mm wide, 49 mm lug to lug, 12.8 mm thick, including the domed crystal, 50-meter water resistance. The balance wheel in the ST8230 is a screw-adjusted version that allows regulation without disassembly. 60-hour power reserve, hand-wound only, no date complication, which keeps the dial clean for the one thing worth looking at, the tourbillon itself. There are real limitations. The steel case is soft by comparison to Swiss stainless steel grades. Owners report that the clasp shows scratches from relatively light contact. The movement doesn't hack, which is a minor inconvenience when setting the time, but not a functional problem in practice. And some suggest buyers who've ordered from AliExpress have reported extended shipping delays and return complications. The recommendation from forum veterans is to buy from the Suggest official website directly, or from Chrono24 verified sellers where seller reputation is documented. Chrono24 has listed verified Suggest tourbillon masters at $766 from Italian sellers with documented transaction histories as recently as 2026. Something worth sitting with. The Suggest tourbillon cage doesn't stop when you pick the watch up and look at it. It keeps rotating. 60 seconds per revolution. Constant. You can watch it for 5 minutes and it still surprises you. There is no Swiss tourbillon in this price range with which to compare it. The comparison doesn't exist. The Suggest exists in a category that, until about 10 years ago, had no lower floor. Below $10,000, there were no tourbillons. Now, there's one for $700. Now to the thing that actually matters about this watch. And it isn't the specification. A Watch Crunch commenter put it plainly in a thread about the Suggest enamel dial model. 97% of us will never get a Swiss tourbillon. The Chinese company Seagull made this really affordable movement so that poor watch enthusiasts like me could own one. That commenter isn't dismissing Swiss watchmaking. They're describing what the market has just done for the first time in 200 years. The tourbillon is now accessible to someone with $700 and a willingness to look past the name on the dial. Think about what that actually means. Think about the person who has spent a decade reading about movements, studying escapements, learning to identify finished versus unfinished lever faces, reading everything they can find about Breguet. Someone who has never been able to afford what they've been studying. That person can now buy a Suggest, open the case back, and watch the thing they've been reading about for 10 years actually rotate for $700. That's not a compromised version of horological enthusiasm. It's a new door that didn't exist before. There's a specific kind of collector the Suggest makes possible. Not the person who wants to say they own a tourbillon at a dinner party. That person will keep spending $10,000 minimum to say it convincingly. The person the Suggest makes possible is the one who actually wants to understand the mechanism. Who will open the case back every morning for 6 months and watch how the cage interaction changes as the power reserve depletes? Who will take it to a watchmaker for its first service, not because anything is wrong, but because they want to talk to someone about what's inside? That collector exists, and until about 2018, they had no watch. The Rolex Submariner No-Date, $10,050. The Suggest tourbillon master, $700. One of them keeps better time. The other makes you stop every morning and look at what's happening inside your wrist. 5 watches, 5 different reasons the waitlist system isn't the only game in town. What's coming is the thing nobody says out loud. The Swiss watch industry built its position on one idea, that the most important things in mechanical watchmaking couldn't be made anywhere else. The tooling, the knowledge, the generational expertise, all of it specific to place, specific to lineage. You couldn't decide to make a tourbillon. You had to learn from someone who learned from someone who learned from Breguet. That story held for about 200 years. And at the summit, it still holds. Grand Seiko's Zaratsu polishing is difficult to replicate. Grubel Forsey's cage finishing exists in a category of its own. Patek's perpetual calendar execution involves tolerances that most factories globally cannot reach. The very top of the market is a real thing, and it costs what it costs for reasons that survive examination. But between that summit and where most of us live, something has shifted. The case finishing on a $165 Chinese diver is now generating debates on What You Seek about whether it belongs in the same sentence as $500 Swiss microbrands. The answer, increasingly, is yes. That isn't a threat to Rolex. The wait lists haven't shortened because of San Martin. People who want a Submariner still want a Submariner, and they're right to. What has changed is the default premise. The assumption that you had to pay Swiss prices to wear a serious mechanical watch. You don't. Not anymore. The evidence is right there, spinning in a $700 case at 1 revolution per minute. So what does this actually mean in practice? It means that the person who would have settled for a quartz watch 10 years ago because mechanical was always out of reach now has 5 entry points above. It means the collector who would have stretched to an entry Tissot as their first automatic can now buy a San Martin diver with better lume and comparable finishing for less money. It means a student who has been reading about tourbillons for 3 years can, with $700, stop reading about them and start watching one. None of this diminishes Rolex. The gray market premium on the Submariner exists because the watch earns it in ways no San Martin ever will. Resale liquidity, service network depth, 80 years of design evolution, and a name that communicates something specific in any room you walk into. These things have value. They cost what they cost. But the Rolex premium is not 0 to 100%. It's real to extraordinary. And somewhere in that gap, between $165 and $10,050, there are watches worth wearing. 5 of them are on this list. The first step is deciding which one you're buying for the right reasons and which one you were buying because the alternative felt impossible. If you had to pick one watch from this list today, which one and why? Let me know in the comments. Like and subscribe.